I think we have nodding heads. I assume we have agreement on that. But let's move on to another issue that came up in the campaign right here in South Carolina this week, and that's the life issue. Mr. Speaker, your campaign sent out a mailing to South Carolina Republicans across this state, essentially questioning Governor Romney's commitment on this issue, saying that he has changed his position on the abortion issue. If you recall, I moderated a debate back in New Hampshire in June. There were 7 candidates then. We have 4 tonight. But when this came up, we talked about it briefly, and then I asked, is this a fair game, an issue in this campaign, or is it case closed? Mr. Kane, who was with us at the time, said case closed, and I paused. No one else took the opportunity to speak up. If it was case closed then, why is it a legitimate issue now?
You just said nobody else spoke. So nobody else said, yes, it's case closed. I mean, Herman Cain said it was case closed. The rest of us it wasn't a particular issue we wanted to fight that night. I mean, we are allowed to run our own campaigns, John. It's not an automatic requirement that we fit in your debate schedule. This is a very straightforward question. Governor Romney, and I accept this. I mean, Governor Romney has said that he had an experience in a lab and became pro-life, and I accept that. After he became pro-life, Romney Care does pay for tax-paid abortions. Romney Care has written into it Planned Parenthood, the largest abortion provider in the country, by name, does not have any right to life group written into it. He did appoint pro-abortion judges, and a branch of the government, which included his appointees, did agree to fund an abortion clinic for Planned Parenthood. All that occurred after he had become pro-life. Now, those are all facts which we validated. And it seems to me that's a legitimate part of the campaign, is to say, okay, if you're genuinely pro-life, how come these things are occurring?
Governor Romney questions whether you're genuinely pro-life.
I'm not questioned on character or integrity very often. And I don't feel like standing here for that, but let me clarify the things which are wrong and what the speaker just said. And he can get a scintilla of truth in there to make it seem like this is a significant issue. But let's go through one by one. First, in Romney Care, there's no mention of abortion whatsoever. The courts in Massachusetts, the Supreme Court, was the body that decided that all times that there was any subsidy of health care in Massachusetts, that one received abortion care. That was not done by the legislature, would not be done by me either. I would have vetoed such a thing. That was done by the courts, not by the legislature, by me. Number two, it's true, somewhere in that bill of ours, 70 pages, there's the mention of the word Planned Parenthood. But it describes a person on a technical advisory board about payment structures. There's no requirement or no participation of Planned Parenthood in our health care plan. With regards to judges, I appointed probably 50 or 60 judges at the trial court level, mostly, the great majority. These were former prosecutors, 80% of them former prosecutors. We don't have a litmus test for appointing judges, asking them if they're pro-life or not pro-life. These are people going after crimes and the like. I didn't get to appoint any Supreme Court justices. I am pro-life. And the Massachusetts Citizens for Life and several other family-oriented groups wrote a letter 2 weeks ago and said they'd watched my record, that I was an avidly pro-life governor. I am a pro-life governor. I am a pro-life individual. And I have to be honest here. It is, this is not the time to be doubting people's words or questioning their integrity. I'm pro-life. By the way, is there any possibility that I've ever made a mistake in that regard? I didn't see something that I should have seen? Possibly. But you can count on me as President of the United States to pursue a policy that protects the life of the unborn, whether here in this country or overseas. And I'll reverse the policies of this president. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, he says you're questioning his integrity.
I'll yield to Senator Centro.
Senator?
I just want to make out one point, and a lot of legislators here in the room, and they know this to be the truth, that if you write a piece of legislation and you say medical care and you do not specifically mention that abortion is not covered, we know from every court decision at the state and federal level that the federal courts and state courts will require it. That is someone every governor knows, every state legislator knows. And so when Governor Romney did not put that in the bill, you can't say, oh, gee, surprise, the court made us cover abortions. He knew very well that the court would make them cover abortions. That's number one. Number two, what we're talking about here is someone who's not going to just check the boxes and say, yes, I'm pro-life. We got a lot of folks who just whisper into the microphone that they're pro-life, and then you have other people go out and fight the battle and defend life and come out of the trenches and actually work to make sure that the dignity of every human life, innocent human life in this country, is protected. And I've done that. And I would say, in contrast with Speaker Gingrich, who on the social issues, in particular when he was Speaker and even afterwards, they were pushed in the back bench. There was a pledge to America that the Congress tried to put together in 2010. I got phone calls ringing off the hook that Speaker Gingrich went in and told them, keep social issues out of the Pledge to America for the 2010 elections. And we need you to come in and help to try to convince these folks to put that back into the pledge. We don't need someone who in the back rooms is going to go say social issues in the front or in the back of the bus and then come out here and try to pretend they're pro-life.
Governor Romney and then Speaker Gingrich, he mentioned your vote. Please, quickly.
Senator, I admire the fact that you've been a stalwart defender of pro-life, and in a state where that's not easy. I was also a governor in a state where being pro-life was not easy. And I battled hard. What came to my desk was a piece of legislation that said we're going to redefine when life begins. In our state, we said life began at conception. The legislature wanted to change that, to say, no, we're going to do it at implantation. I vetoed that. The legislature also said we want to allow cloning for purposes of creating new embryos for testing. I vetoed that. The legislature did not want abstinence education. I pushed and pursued abstinence education. There was an effort to also have a morning after pill provided to, as I recall, young women in their teens. I can't remember the exact age. I vetoed that. I stood as a pro-life governor, and that's why the Massachusetts Pro-Life Family Association supported my record as governor, endorsed my record as governor. I did my very best to be a pro-life governor. I will be a pro-life president. I'm proud of that. I wrote about it in my book. My record is solid. I appreciate your record. I hope you'll appreciate mine.
Mr. Speaker, he mentioned you specifically, then we want to move on, but please respond.
Well, the fact is that I voted with Henry Hyde, who was the leading pro-life advocate in the House for a generation. I had a 98.6% pro-life voting record. The only one we disagreed on was welfare reform, which they scored for reasons we never understood. But otherwise, it was a perfect record on pro-life. When I was Speaker, we twice passed a bill that actually Rick was very active in to end partial birth abortion. Twice it was vetoed by Clinton, but twice we passed it. In the 2010 election, the freshman class has the highest percentage of pro-life members ever in history, and my job was to maximize their winning. And the fact is, we won a huge victory in 2010 with the largest number of pro-life members ever elected in a freshman class.
All right, let's move on. Let's take another question. Congressman, I'll bring you in on this one. Let's take a question now from social media. Question. Before we move on, you want in on this issue? They want you in on this issue. Would you like in on this issue?
But John, once again, it's a medical subject, and I'm a doctor, you know. No, I do want to make a couple comments, because I can remember the very early years studying obstetrics, and I was told, and it was before the age of abortion, and I was told, taking care of a woman that's pregnant, you have two patients. And I think that solves a lot of the problem about, you know, when life begins and all. But I also experienced a time later on in my training in the 1960s when the culture was changing. The Vietnam War was going on, the drugs were there, and pornography came in, and abortion became prevalent even though it was illegal. So the morality of the country changed, but then the law followed up. When the morality changed, it will reflect on the laws. The law is very important. We should have these laws, but law will not correct the basic problem, and that's the morality of the people that we must do. Now, just very, very briefly, I want to talk a little bit about that funding, because the flaw there is if you send funding out and you say, well, you can have it for birth control but not for abortion, all funds are fungible. Even funds that go to any hospital, if you say, well, it's not for birth control and it's not for Planned Parenthood, it's not for abortion, if you send it to the hospital, they can still use that money. This is an indictment of government-run medicine, because you never can sort that all out. You need the government out of that business, or you will always argue over who's paying what bills.
All right, very quickly, Senator.
I think that was directed at me, and so I would just say this. Congressman Paul has a national right-to-life voting record of 50%, which is pretty much what Harry Reid's national right-to-life voting record is. So to go out and say that, you know, you're someone who stands up for the right to life, you repeatedly vote against bills on a federal level to promote the right to life, and you say that this is an individual personal decision or state decision. Life should be protected, and you should have the willingness to stand up on a federal level, on any level of government, and protect what our what our Declaration protects, which is the right of our Creator to life, and that is a federal issue, not a state issue.
Quickly, sir.
Well, just for the record, I wasn't even thinking about you when I was giving my statement, so you are overly sensitive. But it is true that we have a disagreement on how we approach it. I followed what my understanding is of the Constitution, and it does allow for the states to deal with difficult problems. Matter of fact, it allows the states to deal with almost all the problems if you look at it. It is not given, these powers aren't given to the Congress. I see abortion as a violent act. All other violence is handled by the states. Murder, burglary, violence, that's a state issue. So don't try to say that I'm less pro-life because I want to be particular about the way we do it and allow the states the prerogative. This is the solution. This is the solution, because if we would allow the states to write their laws, take away the jurisdiction by a majority vote in the Congress, you repeal Roe versus Wade overnight instead of waiting year after year to change the court system.
All right, we need to take one more break, gentlemen. Stand by. Less than 35 hours away now from the polls opening right here in South Carolina, a state that is crucial, often decisive in Republican presidential politics. Stay with us to hear the candidates' closing arguments to the voters of a state that takes pride in picking presidents.